This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country, and we join their calls for justice.
Have you ever been hacked?
I don't think so, no.
You don't think so?
I mean, yes, everything bad that I've ever done on the internet was me being hacked. Any bad take, if I made a prediction that was incorrect, if I made a joke that was very funny, if I posted some clips of my stand-up that didn't go viral or didn't get any views, that was me being hacked.
And you know what you have to do when that happens?
What?
You report it to Twitter and change passports.
What? Passports?
It was the change passports part of this story that really threw me. And I'm talking like I saw this tweet on the way home from the gym on the train and I couldn't stop laughing. Like I was like, oh, people are going to worry that there's something wrong with me because this is Craig Kelly MP. Retweeted some porn, as politicians want to do.
Sure,
and then said that he was hacked, as those politicians who do that are also want to do.
Yes.
And then when someone pointed this out, like hours later, like a long time later, right? He then said, have reported to Twitter and changing passports.
What does he mean though? Like he thinks that is clearly such a breach of his trust. Like the hackers are really getting in there, and he's changing your passport is such a fucking annoying process.
Tom,
too.
I think he meant to say passwords, but he was so rattled from the hacking incident, I'm sure, not from realizing that he has unwittingly clicked the retweet button on a piece of content that he was enjoying, which is totally his right to do as an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think he simply chose the wrong word.
Oh, okay. Then did you do another tweet saying that last tweet I was hacked?
That was also hacked. That was a second hacker. And I don't know, they're embroiled in a plot to both make me look horny and stupid. I don't know. That's what's happening to me.
That's what's happening to me. They hate me. I'm not even in Parliament anymore, but the deep state are coming after me. The post was, of course, titled Horny Sister Seduced by Her Brother's Friend. It was a 24-minute video. I don't know if I've seen that category before. The sister. I guess that's for straight dudes, right? Straight dudes who want to fuck their mate's sister.
Yeah, you go over to the house and she's just like, and he's like, oh, that's my sister. Ignore her. And you're like, but how could I with those eyes?
Earlier today, my account was hacked. I reported this to Twitter and reset my password. Ugly stuff.
Ugly stuff. He's like, me personally, I found the video disgusting. I was not aroused. Ugly. She was ugly, actually, and I don't like her.
Craig, please don't insult my horny sister by calling her ugly. It's very rude.
The Greens, they're now a national shame and a menace. I used to think there was something uniquely sick in journalist culture. But now I look at our own Greens here and think, whoa, what a disgrace to this country.
We're stuck with the hosts of Chapo Shithouse podcast.
Serious danger to Australia.
You haven't been hacked. You've been smart enough to choose to listen or watch to Serious Danger, a podcast about green politics in Australia. I'm Tom Ballard. This is my horny sister, Emerald Moon. Hello.
Hello. My horny brother, Tom.
Thank you. This is not an official Greens Party podcast. It is produced by Michael the Griffin and made possible with the help of the Green Institute. And holy shit, this week, Federal Parliament is back for 2024 and breaking, it still sucks. Don't worry, everyone. They all came back to school.
We have to go to the serious stuff because you're making me laugh too much and it's hurting my mouth. I have to apologise if I'm not my usual bubbly self.
Is this from a horny accident? What happened?
A horny accident with the dentist involved. She put her fingers in my mouth and her implements and she removed 2 of my wisdom teeth.
Oh my God.
And ground away at the bone. I like to think... Well, have you not had your wisdom teeth removed?
No, I haven't. No.
Yeah. Well, I like to think that I'm built different, and so I can just recover within a fraction of the time frame provided for a regular person, which is why I'm here. Doing okay.
Soldiering on. Was it totally free, all that important dental work? Because of course, your teeth are part of your body, and so it's all covered by a universally
free. Medical system. No, it cost me a lot of money. And I'm like, this isn't a good thing for me. This is like scary and painful and I'm going to have to be in pain and eat mush for days, and yet I'm paying you
Paying for
all
it?
this money? I don't understand.
They should be paying us.
They should pay me
for the honour to
pleasure.
operate.
I do get to keep my teeth though, so.
Congratulations. Oh, like you've got them in a little jar?
Well, in a bag.
We're going to be covering all the various ways in which federal parliament sucks this week. The big stories, we're covering the latest developments on the Stage 3 tax cuts, a climate trigger, and a Greens win on workers' rights to disconnect, along with some IR reform. So stay tuned for that. New patrons, Red Dog, Gabrielle, Artie, Ruby, Joe, the Jam Ringo Experience.
I feel like these have been deliberately crafted, these names, for the purpose of having one of us read them out.
Of course. What, you think someone isn't called M. Hattie into house? Is that what you're saying?
I don't want to speculate on people's names. I would never, but...
Yes, it did. Alex Maria Gill, PC Thug.
She called me a PC thug.
Well, I've been called a greasy thug too, and it never stops hurting.
And Kerry. Thank you. Patreon.com/Serious Danger AU. For just $3 a month, you get bonus content. You get a full bonus episode every fortnight. Our latest Patreon episode featured us discussing the dog shit Sky News Chris Kenny documentary, Liberals in Power. Have you watched any of Nemesis yet? Have you watched this ABC
have
one?
You?
No.
I've watched it. I've already seen it. I've seen the Sky News version. Why do I need the budget? Why do I need the black and gold?
Yes, the socialist version.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, it's a terrible documentary. We watched it. You don't have to. We had a lot of fun discussing it, and you can listen to that as well as the full back catalogue with episodes with lots of cool people. Check that out, and you help us support the show. You can also like and subscribe us on YouTube. That really helps. Give us a 5-star review on your iTunes or your podcast Apple app of choice, whatever it may be. And we can tease, perhaps, Emerald, that there are plans in the works for another...
Much like a horny sister.
But
we're about to tease you, dear listener.
There are plans for another live Serious Danger show in 2024. We're working on it. We'll bring you details as soon as they are all confirmed. But we love being on stage live in front of our adoring public. And we're going to do it again, God damn it.
Last one was very fun, so I'm excited.
Yay!
Artists for ceasefire, peace in the world.
All right, let's whip through these important stories that came out of Parliament as Parliament comes back. Are you excited about Parliament being back, Emerald, and democracy being in action?
I'm so excited. Goody. Yay. I love it. Makes me feel good. Makes everyone around me feel good too. Everyone's really calm and sweet. Yay.
I'm glad. All right. Stage 3 tax changes. This week we found out that after all their moaning and whining and carrying on like old pork chops, the coalition is going to support the Labor government's amendments to the Stage 3 tax cuts, which means they're pretty much set to go through. They're going to be waved through Parliament.
The Greens would never bitch and fold. No,
never.
We would never do something like that.
We bitch, we win, and we continue to bitch. That's our approach. They're probably going to put up amendments and then they're not going to get through and they're still going to vote for them. There was a coalition joint party room meeting where the majority of MPs agreed to put up amendments but would wave through the tax plan when they ultimately failed. Again, just a wonderful piece of pointless.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Again, Greens probably can't comment on that. We love an amendment that gets immediately shot in the face. Here's what Peter Dutton had to say.
We're supporting this change, not to support the Prime Minister's lie, but to support those families who need help now, because Labor has made decisions that have made it much harder for those families. We will take to the next election a significant tax policy which will reduce taxes for Australian taxpayers, because we know that there is going to be a lot of support needed to help Australian families recover from this period of Labor.
I love the idea of people having to recover from the trauma of the Labor government period.
I think they're talking about financially, Tom, not emotionally. But
no, I don't believe that. I think Peter Dutton thinks that people are going to need to go to therapy.
It's emotional, yeah. Psychological damage.
What do you reckon of this little line he's trying to trot out here now? Now, we've heard about the reframing of the coalition as the party of the working class, but he's really just like embracing that fully. We are the party of small business. We are the party of the working class. Labor is the party of big business. They are the party of the union bosses, not the worker.
I mean, is he wrong? with the last sentence. He's absolutely wrong with the first two.
Yes.
But is he wrong with the last?
Labor is the party of the union bosses, not the workers. Well, they're certainly very
That's
cozy.
fucking
They're
true.
Yeah, that is pretty true.
Yeah.
I love the idea of calling the party of big business. It's just the Spider-Man meme of the coalition Labor pointing at each other, saying, "You're the party
and just
of
like
big
if
business."
the idea, it's like giving yourself a nickname, like, and you're like, "What?
Oh, great.
This is who I am." Everyone's like, "Yes, okay, Peter."
We are the party of the working class. That's why we are fighting to get people earning over $200K a year a $9,000 a year tax cut.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Apparently, things got a little bit spicy in Parliament as Treasurer Jim Chalmers introduced the legislation to the House for the Stage 3 tax cut changes. Mr. Dutton was making his announcement. Coalition senators lined up to lash out at the tax plan. So, of course, as Dutton's out there saying we are basically going to support this in the Parliament, I guess they're saying this sucks and is no good. The coalition introduced a motion calling on Albanese to apologise to voters for breaking his commitment to Stage 3.
Oh, not the will you apologise. Like, of all the motions, I can't. I hate those ones.
I hate all these snowflakes. Everyone's so woke. Anyway, we want the Prime Minister to say sorry to us.
Yeah. Will you apologise?
That motion was defeated after the Greens voted with the Labor to sink it. Finance Minister Katie Gallagher was forced to withdraw after she accused the opposition of disrupting the Senate's business to bitch and moan.
Unparliamentary. What? I was talking about a female dog, miss. Bitches say what?
Yeah, we love the withdrawal, as always. I guess my question to you is, was this always going to be inevitable? I mean, was there ever going to be a situation in which the coalition would actually vote against the tax cut changes? Was the road set as soon as they announced the changes?
Yeah, surely not. Like, they'd have to, I mean, they're stupid, but they're not that stupid, right?
Right. Can they get any political capital out of this, out of both supporting
Broken Promise?
Yes, Broken Promise, and then while still supporting the changes? And so,
I don't
how
think
bad
so.
is it?
I don't think anyone buys it. Like, maybe for their donors they need to, but beyond that.
Well, it's probably not going to work for them because all the polling across multiple sort of outlets this week sort of showed that the changes were very popular. But something like 60% of the electorate say actually this is good. Getting more of a tax cut and more money to us is good, and that's good. Labor remains at 52-48, two-party preferred. I saw some News Corp reporting being like, they get no bump. They're just staying exactly where they are, so they're not being rewarded by voters. Whereas, like, well, no, this is exposing the broken promise attacks basically having no massive effect in the average voter's mind.
Sure. Or maybe the interpretation is voters are like, cool, do your nonsense. We don't care. Like,
Right.
we know that this is just more bullshit. Like, I think it's probably true that maybe the changes haven't had any kind of perceptible or significant change in the voting intention or support.
Yeah. Well, for me, the other lesson here is the thing that we said the whole time for the Stage 3 tax cuts, that is the crime of changing your mind or breaking the commitment, breaking the promise is far, far less, is ameliorated by the fact that the thing you are doing is good, okay? And making the case for the good thing that you are doing can counterbalance the fact that you made a shitty decision to support the Stage 3 tax cuts in the first place, and so you should make that case. And they should do that more. They should do the good things and explain why they're doing the good things and trust in Labor's ability to do that. They should get better at fighting for what they believe in, making the case for good stuff, because that does actually cut through, as it did during the election campaign when Albanese backed in increasing, making sure that low-paid workers' wages didn't go backwards, as they're doing now with Stage 3 tax cuts. Fighting for good things that you can believe in and explain, if you do that well enough with enough discipline, I think you can actually make a difference and cut through and do good stuff.
Except that, like, the Stage 3 tax cuts are still not a good thing.
Still bad, yes.
The changes, that's the thing that really frustrates me that has been lost. Like, the changes improve a bad thing slightly.
Yes.
And yet, like, again, I mean, we already criticized the media on this last time and the way that they, like, focus in on the idea of the broken promise and that sort of thing. But the other thing that they have done is accept the kind of the premise of the debate, or like the focus of the debate being on whether, these changes are good or bad. Where, like, and completely abandoned speaking about what the actual proposed reforms are. Like there was that ABC article that now I think came out last week, but really framed it as, lower income earners, or it actually framed it as a generational thing. It was like Gen Z are the biggest winners from the stage 3 changes, but framed it as though they were actually talking about the reforms that are being proposed, the changes that are going to be made to our taxation system. Not the case. They were only talking about, in comparison to the old package, how the reforms, like the impacts of that, and that those make it slightly better for Gen Z and slightly worse for higher income earners. And it's like, but no, still the biggest benefit of the stage 3 tax cuts goes towards higher income earners. That's how they're, how they're proposed. That's how they're built. That's how they're structured. Designed is the word.
We're still losers, ABC. We are still losing.
Still losers.
Never forget that we're still losing.
And yet, they're like, we have to fight back against the coalition trying to frame these changes as bad. And instead of just doing your job as reporters and being like, what are the impacts of this government reform on people?
And man, this again just reiterates how shitty it is for Labor to have ever supported or voted for these changes, because then they find themselves in this position where they have to land on some kind of compromise, right?
Yeah.
Which is just only cutting the tax cut to the rich people in half. It's still $4,500 every single year, totaling $84 billion over the next decade in lost revenue that could be going to make people's lives better. But no, the sensible centre, we supported this horrible policy. Now we're slightly changing it. We're making it a slightly less horrible policy. So actually, that's how you do good politics, in the middle.
It seems like the Greens have been more out this week kind of trying to reiterate the fact that, these stage 3 tax cuts in themselves are designed to overwhelmingly benefit the rich.
Yes.
Like trying to undermine that idea. So I don't know if that indicates they're getting close to, like, do you think that the Greens will vote against the change? I mean, they can't vote against the legislative changes to slightly improve them, right? They can only continue to attack the overall change, the overall package.
Well, certainly when it wasn't clear what the coalition's position was going to be, the party was making a lot of noises saying, if we're in negotiations, these are the things we want to talk about. We want to talk about increasing job seeker. We want to talk about getting dental into Medicare. We want to make changes to negative gearing. The fact that Labor's changed their mind on this is proof that they're open to good ideas, that there is a potential for Labor to do something better now. So they should change their position when it's terrible policy. But you would argue that with the coalition supporting it, then the Green support is irrelevant in terms of the changes actually passing.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to framing our political debate, I think the party still hasn't formalised a position on how they're actually going to vote, even as irrelevant as our vote might be in regards to the bill's overall success. There's been chat about making some calls for a Senate inquiry into the changes, and I think the coalition supports that call. That's obviously their political for their own political reasons. You send an inquiry, I guess you can keep the story going, air it as much as possible. You can sort of make your case.
Do you mean a Senate inquiry into the bill to legislate the changes, or like a separate Senate inquiry?
A Senate inquiry into these changes.
Into the bill. Is that because, and this is, I don't necessarily understand how federal parliament works in this regard, like is not every bill goes to a Senate inquiry, just some?
No, I think the Senate has to refer a bill to an inquiry.
Right, okay.
My understanding is it happens quite frequently and is often part of the horse trading of the Senate, and minor parties or independents, crossbench people can say, hey, we got this inquiry to look into this stuff further. Now, of course, that inquiry will be probably dominated by Labor, and will say these are great changes, and the coalition will present a dissenting report saying that I guess we support the changes, but they've also betrayed the working class, and the Greens will say, what about dental into Medicare? And
it's an opportunity.
And it'll be one waste of time.
Yeah. Sometimes, I guess, like in theory, sometimes they get amendments coming out of these Senate inquiries.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I don't know what amendments they might be able to secure.
We could make that case. And again, from the Greens' point of view, you could, again, occasionally out of these Senate inquiries comes more information, comes questions, and basically, again, it's just another platform to make your case about all the money that is still going to rich people out of these changes, where that money could be going instead, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, if the scope of the Senate inquiry is broad enough to enable like an examination or a consideration of the overall package rather than just the changes.
Yeah, well, it always feels like the Greens are trying to in these inquiries, paint the bigger picture and talk about, the broader the cost of living crisis, wealth inequality in this country. But of course, yes, the government just wants to focus on this particular bill and not worry about other issues, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, of course they would.
Do you think the way that we vote on the changes in Parliament affects the way we campaign and frame it at the next election? I mean, presumably the Greens are going to the next election saying, hey, we should tax billionaires particularly and rich people far more than we are. We should probably get rid of the top end of the stage 3 tax cuts changes. Is that undermined by the fact that we vote for the changes?
So. I don't think that, I think that the vote on this doesn't necessarily impact that because, I don't think that it should anyway. My view is strategically you should vote for something that's going to improve the bad thing.
Yeah. Because the alternative in this instance
is leaving it just as bad.
is leaving the terrible stage 3 tax cuts in place. So there you go. But you're right. Just before we move on to some other stories, the big responsibility of the Greens at this point is to keep pointing out that the stage 3 tax cuts are terrible. It still sucks. It still involves giving rich people a $4,500 tax cut. That would suck at any point, particularly when our society is unequal and public services are crumbling and people are living, 1 in 8 Australians are living in poverty, especially now more than ever during a cost of living crisis. If you do that, you will spark the ire of the geniuses of the ALP, and I think that was illustrated in a Twitter exchange this week. An exchange.
Max is back from baby leave and ready to debate former ALP treasurers on Twitter.
ALP president too. The fucking president of the whole party. Max Shalamatha tweets, what would you choose? 1, bring dental into Medicare so everyone could go to the dentist for free. That sounds pretty good.
That sounds great.
Or 2, spend $84 billion giving people earning over $200K a $4,500 a year tax cut.
I don't know. That's tough.
That sounds pretty bad. Labor chose tax cuts for politicians and billionaires. I reckon the public would prefer free dental. He then goes on to say, from door knocking, even people earning over $200K would choose dental into Medicare. Labor's changes to stage 3 tax cuts will still see the budget deprived of over $300 billion and make things like free dental even harder to win. Wayne Swann at Swanee QLD quote tweeted this saying, in Greenland, there is magic pudding for everything.
#Ozpol.
#Ozpol. Now, this is so infuriating.
Magic
that is
pudding.
a 100% Tory line, okay? That is magic money tree. That is Theresa May. That is Margaret fucking Thatcher.
I was going to say, it's Thatcher,
Insane. But also, and it's insane, it's an attack you would hear often when the Greens would just say, hey, let's have free dental or hey, let's have free university. But even in this instance, we are specifically identifying the money that is being spent, and you do spend money when you're not taxing money.
That's the pudding.
We're literally – there's no magic pudding. It's the $84 billion that your political party, Wayne Swann, wants to give to the wealthiest people in this country. We're saying take that money and instead of doing that, spend it on something really good like making dental dental healthcare in this country free at the point of service.
It's called budgeting. It's called economic management. It's not magic. It's not magic. It's just politics. It's just the budget.
And how about this, Wayne? You love numbers, mate. You won the award for best treasure or whatever the fuck. The cost of the tax cuts for rich people over the next decade, $84 billion. The estimated cost of bringing dental into Medicare over the next decade, $77 billion. Now, again, I'm not good at maths. Which ones? Hang on. Wait a minute.
What a fucking idiot.
Max replied, having a former federal Labor treasurer ridicule the idea of covering dental in our public health system as dipping into magic pudding is a good reminder that Labor has long since abandoned even the moderate social democratic values represented under Gough. I suppose countries like France, which includes dental in their public health insurance, just managed to find the magic pudding. And then this
Swan comes back. They're tweeting each other. It's like, oh,
aren't you busy, Wayne? Aren't you? I mean, Max, I guess you could make that argument about Max.
Also.
But, what are you doing, Wayne? As a Labor treasurer who presented 2 emission trading schemes, the first blocked by the Greens.
Ding, ding, ding.
Do you think people in Labor have in their draft folders on Twitter, any tweet needs to mention the CPRS? They literally can't open a new one without.
Yeah.
paid parental leave, the NDIS, and tripled the tax-free threshold. I know you've got to get the balance right in fiscal policy. You can't spend regardless of economic conditions. You are spending this money. This money is going out.
Yeah, and what are the economic conditions that prescribe that you should be skewing, distribution of funds in the economy towards the upper classes, towards the rich, rather than people who are struggling? Like, what are the economic conditions that require that? I'm not an economist, but I think you're just saying words because they sound good. Get the balance right in fiscal policy, economic conditions. Like, what are you actually saying, Wayne? Because you have no argument.
Nothing. And Max points out, finally, do you forget you were treasurer when the Greens secured free dental for kids? I don't know how you can argue economic conditions don't allow funding dental into Medicare, but they apparently do allow for spending $330 billion on tax cuts. How about instead of tax cuts, we do dental instead?
What did Wayne say?
I don't think he responded to that. I think that was the end of the thread.
Oh, so sad. Did you see, this is a slight tangent, but did you see that Max Chandler Mather is going to debate the head of the National Property Council live? You haven't seen that? Yeah,
no,
that's a thing that's happening. I think it's happening at the press club.
Hell yeah, dude. Okay, great. Well, let's watch that. That'll be great fun.
Yeah.
Good on you,
Good
Max.
content for us.
Yes, Godspeed.
And have you always been a right-of-centre person, or are you conservative? Where are you politically?
I would say that everyone starts off as a lefty and then wakes up at some point after you start either making money, working, trying to run a business, trying to buy a home, and then realise what crap ideas they all are, and then you go to the right.
And you heard, of course, Liz Truss speak just now, Jacob Rees-Mogg. How did you find that? Who was your favourite speaker?
Oh, the speakers today were fantastic. I thought Liz was actually really, really interesting to listen to. Jacob for PM. The MP for Ashfield was awesome. Love a Northerner, straight to the point and very sensible and for real people.
Another quick story from this week before we get into the IR reforms. Some bad news about the old climate trigger. A Senate committee has recommended the Parliament vote down a bill that would insert a climate trigger into Australia's national environmental laws. The bill, introduced by the Greens, would for the first time require the Environment Minister to consider.
Just think. Just think about it.
Stop. Think.
Count down from 10.
Collaborate.
Take
listen.
Deep breaths. And consider, do I want to fuck the climate?
Do I, the Environment Minister, want to do bad things to the environment? To consider the climate impact of a major development during the assessment process under Australia's environmental laws. It proposes a ban on developments that will emit more than 100,000 tonnes of CO2 a year and a requirement for ministerial approval for any projects that would emit between 25,000 and 100,000 tonnes of CO2 annually. Sounds like a great proposal.
Sounds good to me. Did it pass?
Wrong. Government and coalition members of an upper house committee considering the bill have recommended it be rejected. This was despite recognising the significant and profound impact of climate change on the environment, including past and future emissions of greenhouse gases, and the need for significant reductions of Australia's greenhouse gas emissions. Wonderful. Thank you so much, guys, for acknowledging that's important, but let's not do the thing that will actually do that. While the committee commends the objectives and intention of the bill, we see you, we hear you, we love you. We respect that. The committee notes a number of significant recent developments since this bill was introduced. So I guess we introduced the bill prior to the safeguard mechanism, I suppose.
Right.
It said even though during the safeguard mechanism negotiations we were like, okay, we'll support this with this, but climate trigger, guys.
Want a climate trigger, yeah.
It said this included last year's passage of reforms to the safeguard mechanism, which would result in emissions reductions from both existing and new industrial facilities. The report said the bill, by contrast, would only deal with emissions from new facilities and risk duplicating work already being done under the safeguard mechanism.
Except that it does a different thing.
It does a different thing. Once again, I hate inquiries, I hate reports, I hate reviews, I hate commissions. I mean, just again, the Labor, of course, the coalition isn't going to support this. Labor says, no, actually, we don't need this, Greens, because the Labor policy that we have is perfect and can't be improved upon. In a dissenting report, the Greens said it was critical the Parliament pass the bill to close a glaring loophole in Australia's laws. They wrote it was disappointing to see the major party report rule out supporting a climate trigger, a position that ignored the deep and inherent link between our climate and the environment.
Yeah, they're sorry, but they're pretty closely connected.
I think so.
Climate and the environment.
Yeah, I
Right.
reckon that. So,
Yeah.
yes, the Environment Minister should have something to say about that.
About climate. But no, I mean, who are we?
The safeguard mechanism is but one measure required to address the threats of climate change on Australia's communities, environment, economies. The safeguard mechanism does not consider the impact of fossil fuels and global warming on our natural environment. So again, just putting this in plain English, right? The new fossil fuel project comes up. The Environment Minister, I mean, they are required to consider the environmental impact on lots of things. Does this affect habitat? Does this affect local endangered species? Yada, yada, yada. But they cannot consider the impact that fossil fuel project will have on the climate, which is what the biggest, one of the biggest, if not the biggest existential threat to the natural environment and our planet.
I have a question about the Greens climate trigger bill. Was the proposal like those emissions limits or thresholds?
Yeah.
Does that relate to emissions from coal and gas burned in Australia only or worldwide?
You would certainly fucking hope so. I mean, reading about this story, there was the classic kind of, we'll reduce the emissions that come out of, say, Queensland or what have you, like, again, trying to ignore the impact of Scope 3 emissions, fossil fuel projects that produce material that's then, like, dig up coal or what have you, that is then exported and burnt overseas. Yeah. I haven't read the climate trigger bill. One would hope that the Greens would be cluey enough to work within to point out the fact that that includes Scope 3.
Presumably. Yeah, but I mean, but if so, like, that in itself is a very clear distinction from the safeguard mechanism, which only applies to domestic emissions. That's one of the biggest problems with the safeguard mechanism, right? Like, we're only talking about, and all the climate targets, the emissions reduction targets, renewable, all those fucking targets, we're still only talking about domestic emissions, which are really a fraction of Australia's real impact on global warming. And it just blows my mind that still, that's the scope of discussion.
Well, prepare to be even more depressed, because literally on the same day, so this is on Wednesday, we got the news story about the fact that this climate change thing that said inquiry hands down a report saying no climate trigger, thank you. Literally the same day.
Oh, I know this one.
Headline, federal government approval, the final hurdle for mega Queensland coal mine. Queensland government approves Winchester South mine despite report warning of potential climate change consequences.
But
Emerald,
wait a minute.
Please tell us, what is your lovely mate, little Giggles, Stephen Miles, doing in fucking Queensland? What's going on there?
I thought we had a good climate conscious premier now. I thought Stephen Miles was going to save us.
I thought we didn't need a climate trigger because the problem's solved, apparently. Like, we're not going to approve any new massive projects that are going to fuck the environment. No,
this is the premier that, like, literally within days of taking the premiership, stood up and did a big speech about how he wanted to, or, told media that he wanted to put climate front and center. He was going to increase our ambition on emissions reduction targets. It's new and improved Queensland Labor. And yet in the last 2 weeks has approved 2 new coal mines. This one is massive. What is it? So Winchester South, it's a Whitehaven project, extract up to 17 million tonnes of thermal and metallurgical coal each year for 28 years. So not even just metallurgical coal, because I know there will be people who argue, we still need met coal for steel, blah, blah, blah. Thermal coal, what the fuck do we need it for?
Yes.
This project is estimated to produce 583 million tonnes of greenhouse gas pollution, more than Australia's national annual greenhouse gas emissions. And so 14.2 million of that is on-site emissions, and then 567 is Scope 3 emissions when it's burned overseas. And so that is how he does it, because he goes, we're increasing our emissions reduction targets because it's only about Queensland, it's only about Australia. Like, I don't know how many times I can say it. There is one atmosphere. If the coal is burned overseas, the way that global warming works, I'm not a scientist, but, like, it will heat the globe. And that includes Queensland and Australia, whether or not the emissions occur within our little section of the fucking globe.
It's Queensland climate is for Queenslanders. That's what it's the same attitude.
I don't know. We're going to construct some sort of, like, invisible wall around Queensland that actually means the emissions here, or we're not affected by global warming. No, this is going to affect us. It is going to, as the Governor General, the Queensland Governor General, even when they recommended that this mine be fucking approved, at the same time conceded that it would potentially limit human rights because they're required to consider that as part of Queensland's Human Rights Act, conceded that it would potentially limit human rights because of the impacts on the climate and the impacts that would have on people's right to a safe environment, their right to a safe place to live, their right to safety, their right to life, all of which are enshrined in the Human Rights Act. This mine will inhibit that because of the emissions, and yet approved. Anyway.
Approved. There's a whole other part about Human Rights Act stuff too. It's like a state government can see, like, we've considered this, it will be bad for human rights, but we still think it's good.
Anyway,
This mine will also clear 2,000 hectares southeast of, is it Moranbah?
Moranbah? Oh, God. I don't know.
Queensland are cancelled. Of habitat of endangered and threatened species, such as koalas. Again, so major threat to koalas, this one. The Australian painted snipe, the ornamental snake, and the squatter pigeon, according to the Coordinator General's report. But hey, who gives a fuck about that? And so now it needs to go to the federal government for approval. And so it will go to the Environment Minister, Tanya Plibersek, who has no obligation to consider the climate impact of this massive fucking coal mine. Fuck Labor in the face. They don't care about you or the environment or the future.
They're evil.
Green Senator Sarah Hanson-Young said the coal mine was a test for the federal government minister after the Queensland government gave it the green light. We need new environmental laws that stop new coal mines from further damaging our climate, which is why the Greens are fighting for a climate trigger. We urge the government to work with us so coal mines like this are stopped in their tracks. So actually that story came out before we then got the report saying that the Senate inquiry said no to the climate trigger.
Yeah. Do you think so? Are there Labor truthers being like, oh, Plibersek's going to reject it? She'll save us, so that, Queensland Labor gets to go, oh, hey, regions, we still like coal. We're still approving coal. While at the same time, they can tell the city that they have increased emissions reduction targets because there's an election coming up. But then the feds get to say, no, we do care about climate. I don't know,
I have no idea. I mean, again, we know that Tanya Plibersek has approved coal mines during her time.
She has been approving coal mines.
She has been approving coal mines. I think it's more likely not that she would approve this one.
Yeah.
They'll do it on a Friday or something, or just before Easter weekend or something, just to avoid media scrutiny. But look, if she doesn't, then great. But regardless, she should be compelled to consider the climate impact of this project because it's fucking massive. And the real climate impact when the stuff gets burned overseas. I mean, there was an amazing editor's note at the end of the Guardian article on this. It says this: the headline of this article was amended on the 7th of February after it incorrectly stated that the coal mine could double Australia's emissions. The project would contribute 583 tonnes of greenhouse gas pollution, more than Australia's national annual greenhouse gas emissions of 463.9 million tonnes. But 567 million tonnes of that pollution would be created when it is burned overseas.
Right. Oh, good.
I'm so relieved.
That's fine then.
I guess we'll wait and see, but yes, I guess we should maintain pressure on it regardless of her legal obligation to consider the climate impact. She has a moral one, and I guess we all have a moral obligation to try and make sure that these new fossil fuel projects do not happen. They cannot happen if we are serious about doing something about the climate crisis, for God's sakes.
Jonathan Sree's Greens want to cut funding for Brisbane roads. They want to cut the speed limit too and impose a new tax on drivers. They'll tax property owners as well. They want to decriminalise hard drugs, even defund our police. And the scariest part? Tracy Price and Labor are along for the ride. She knows they can't control council without the Greens' help, which means things could go downhill fast. A Labor Greens Council? The chaos would cost us. Don't risk it. Authorised B. Riley, LMP Brisbane.
Our third Parliament story of the week, dear listener, the IR bill and the right to disconnect. So this week, the Senate passed the Closing Loopholes No. 2 bill. Now, I've forgotten the full name of the bill, but that's what they call it, the Closing Loopholes No. 2 bill, because this is the one that was split. We passed some of it last year, but then they split off some parts of it, saying that they're too contentious. We have to figure out if and when we're going to pass them in 2024. Last year was when they did things around changing labour hire rules, and they banned engineered stone, which is deadly. Those are very good things. This one has a whole bunch of things. It includes a new definition of casual work, minimum standards for gig workers, particularly, people driving for Uber and that sort of thing, protections for road transport workers, and, thanks to the Greens, a right to disconnect. Ding, ding, ding.
Thank God.
I mean, I feel like I only saw a lot of coverage of the right to disconnect, probably because I'm in a Greens bubble. I didn't see a whole lot of coverage of the other IR changes, but is that just me because I've been a little bit switched off?
You mean like that was the major takeaway that the media was talking about in response to these IR things? Yeah, I mean, you can, it's a little bit more juicy perhaps, or it's like a detail that comes out of it that lots of people can talk about. It's very relatable for people in their own lives and the relationship to their job, and probably gets the right wing nobody wants to work anymore sufficiently outraged, and other people saying, oh yeah, I hate my boss, so this looks pretty good. And perhaps the other stuff in the bill is a little bit dry. Is that fair to say?
Well, I suppose so, but I also think it's kind of important stuff. So I want to dig more deeply into the right to disconnect stuff because, I think that's been the focus, and that's the thing, the big amendment that the Greens won in the Senate. But the other stuff, like the casual work changes, are around considering not just like what you are called in your contract that you're a casual worker, but how that actually looks in practice. And so if you are technically a casual worker, but you are rostered on the exact same, hours every week, every day, every week for months at a time consistently, then your employer kind of has an obligation to consider offering you a pathway to permanency after a certain period of time. So 6 months for a large business or 12 for a small business. The gig worker stuff, I think, is even more, topical and interesting. This is around individuals and organisations being able to apply to the Fair Work Commission for orders around minimum standards in the gig economy. So things like pay, penalty rates, super, payment terms, insurance, and deactivation, where if you work on an app, the employer just like removes you from an app so they can apply for kind of restrictions around that.
Right.
If they meet these certain criteria, which is they're engaged under a services contract or they perform digital platform work and have low bargaining power in relation to that contract. I think the exploitation of particularly delivery drivers is one of the biggest labour issues of our time, surely. It's pretty fucked, so that seems significant to me.
Okay, but this is just the right for people to apply to the Fair Work Commission, right? Because, the Fair Work Commission has a history of sometimes having terrible rulings and not recognising the fact that people who work for Uber are regular employees. There have been some good rulings in that too. Again, Fair Work Commission basically depends on which stacked justice or which stacked judge or official is appointed to it. Sophie Mirabella was on the fucking Fair Work Commission, for God's sake.
But I think that, as I understand it, pretty much all of these changes in the bill are within that framework. Like, it's kind of all about what the Fair Work Commission can consider.
Yes.
Which is not necessarily, always made clear from the reporting, but that has come to be my understanding. The other thing that the bill does, which I think is interesting, is expand unions' right to enter a workplace without notice to investigate potential underpayment.
Nice.
And there's also these amendments that I guess the Greens must have secured last year around intractable bargaining, where the employer and the employee can't agree, that the terms of an arbitrated outcome must not be less favourable to each of them as covered by an existing workplace deal. And so, of course, business groups just are said the quiet part out loud on this one, because they were saying, we're worried that it means that unions will be no worse off. This is a quote from employer groups, will be no worse off on a clause-by-clause basis if they dig in and seek an arbitrated outcome from the industrial umpire, which would encourage them to do so. So I guess it's saying, it will stop unions from just negotiating in good faith. But it's but if they know that they're going to get a good outcome from that process that they're not going to get from negotiating with their employer because their employer is not willing to fucking improve their conditions, then they surely should be able to do that.
Yes. We want to punish people for sticking in. We want to weaken unions and workers' bargaining power by punishing them for sticking to their guns and going to the tribunal.
Yeah. But one of the funnier, a lot of these parts of the bill were weakened by none other than Mr. David Pocock.
No.
Our hot, precious king being anti-worker. And the funniest part, the most confusing part about this as well is that the key player on the green side, pro-worker Pocock, we've got Barbara Pocock, the good Pocock, and then we've got David Pocock also in the Senate, who's the anti-worker Pocock.
Oh,
so
no.
I'll try not to confuse everyone just by referring to Pocock, because I do that thing where I separate them in my brain without realizing that it's the same name. But it was the two Pococks going up against each other, one for the worker, one for the bosses.
There are two Pococks inside you, yes. Choose which way Pocock.
Which way Pocock.
So what's his deal? Why does what's his concerns?
Yeah, I guess this guy's anti-worker. I mean, and someone pointed out, someone was
a teal, an independent with no class politics whatsoever.
I know,
Are you serious?
But the funniest thing is, I can't remember who now, but someone tweeted like, David Pocock being pro-unemployed but anti-worker is so interesting.
Interesting.
And it's true, like, because he's like raised the rate and support unemployed workers, but then when they're employed, he's like, no rights. I don't know if that's like a teal, like a rich kind of, no class politics thing of being like, oh, the poor povo unemployeds, but like, fuck the worker. I don't know.
What is his sympathies much more aligning with small business owners, I assume?
He's been all like, oh, we need to retain flexibility and make it fair and the right balance. It's all about flexibility, blah, blah, blah. I had a look at his press release on his website about the amendments that he had secured to, quote, preserve flexibility. Because it looks like he kind of was the key swing senator on this for a long time, and the Greens had to negotiate with him, and he only agreed to finally support the bill with a bunch of amendments, including ones co-sponsored by Jackie Lambie, who was also extremely anti-worker on this, including all of this isn't the full list. These were just a few that I picked out. So delaying the commencement of the casual path to permanency provisions for 6 months, clarifying that an employer may be able to offer or refuse to offer work to a casual employee. So basically, that retaining that, saying that they can just refuse to offer work. Make it simpler for businesses, especially small businesses, to refuse casual conversion by removing the requirement to provide a detailed statement of reasons. So they can just refuse without providing any detailed statement of reasons. Great.
And that got through?
Yep. Allow employees to refuse an employee request for conversion on, quote, fair and reasonable operational grounds. This is where it gets depressing, right? Because it's like you read about all these changes, and then once you start looking into the details, you're like, oh, they were actually just whittled away to the point that they're effectively useless.
Great.
By people like David Pocock. Thanks, mate.
Yeah.
He also made so those gig worker provisions, the 3 criteria that I mentioned that they would need that they can meet to become eligible to apply for those conditions, etc. He made it so that they need to meet at least 2 of those rather than 1, which was the initial proposal. And he also said that the whole bill, and particularly the right to disconnect, as negotiated by the Greens, should be reviewed after 2 years. And also the right to disconnect should be delayed for small businesses for 18 months. Which is interesting because that then leaves 6 months of operation for small businesses before he then wants it to be reviewed. It has to be reviewed within 2 years, by the way. So
what
honestly,
a hellish 18 months it's going to be too. Your phone's going to be blowing up at every fucking opportunity.
Oh my God.
From your boss.
Yeah. And then you get reviewed.
This is just a text to let you know I fucking hate these new laws.
Yeah.
You're my slave.
Sending memes, like the worst memes possible. And you're like, why, David Pocock? Why?
I want to disconnect.
Anyway, so that was pretty cooked. But onto the right to disconnect. Do you have an initial take on this whole right to disconnect thing? Like, how do you understand it?
Lazy. Everyone, no one wants to work anymore.
No one wants to work anymore.
People want to have their own lives outside of work hours and not be constantly answering emails and texts from their employer. And it's laziness, and it's not how you get excellence or innovation, people.
That's it. And that's the show, everybody. We're serious danger. Well, I think a lot of people have misinterpreted, including me. Like, I didn't understand until I looked more closely how the right to disconnect works. So what it is effectively like a legal right to ignore contact outside of working hours without compensation. So it just means that an employee can't be punished for ignoring that kind of contact, and that they could raise a complaint about that kind of contact. But the way that it makes this change is by creating a national standard that new awards and agreements would need to comply with. So that means that your existing award or agreement, if it doesn't have that, like it doesn't come into effect immediately, you would need to go back to the Fair Work Commission to review whether it's in accordance with these new national standards. And it also still includes, crucially, a bunch of reasonable grounds for contact out of hours that the Fair Work Commission could consider, including, for example, if you're paid for it, which a lot of positions are. They might have an allowance for this understanding that you'll likely be contacted outside of hours, or if it's in your job description, in your contract, if it's legally required, like if there's kind of an obligation to contact you under an existing law, if it's an emergency, if there's a change of work conditions or hours. So a lot of people being like, oh, great, so you show up to the wrong job site at 8 a.m. because your boss isn't allowed to contact you, or you are a casual and you don't get, they can't contact you about changing shifts or anything. No, that is obviously a reasonable ground for contact. One thing I thought was interesting, though, is, like the Fair Work Commission also has to consider things like what your caring responsibilities are.
Right.
So in theory, like if you have caring responsibilities, you might be more likely to get a favourable ruling from the Commission about what's unreasonable contact than if you didn't.
Does that include if you don't care about your job and you don't want to have to be thinking about it outside of the
that was very clear in the legislation. The Fair Work Commission has to consider that. That's right.
I'm sorry, you've emailed me and I don't care, so I will not be addressing this until 9 a.m. tomorrow.
I think that's what they call them, right?
I've had enough. Dismissed.
I do not care. So these were really, these reforms, these amendments were championed by Barbara Pocock, because I guess she's IR spokesperson for the Greens portfolio holder in the Senate. I had a look at her speech moving these amendments in the Senate this week. And the kind of context that she gave, she said, quote, Elizabeth Broderick's recent review of workplace culture in EY, I guess that's Ernst & Young, found that about 1/3 of their employees were working 51 or more hours a week, at least 1 week out of every 4. This competitive culture, which affects so many workplaces now, and it certainly impacts the culture faced by many casual and part-time workers, is intensified by technology that makes workers always available, where the culture is never say no. So there's a lot of like the Greens have been running a campaign on this for a while, and I think particularly they started pushing for it in the context of COVID, where more people working from home, more people have alternative kind of methods of arrangement. Everyone has smartphones. You have email on your phone. Your boss has your number. There's a lot of this thing about technology. Like, do you think that that's true, that there is a new culture of you're expected to be more on call, more available than in the past?
Well, certainly. Again, disclaimer, I don't have a real job. I'm a comedian.
Yeah, what do you know? Why am I asking you?
What the fuck am I doing? But certainly, I mean, you see interviews with, business psychos who are like, when I'm interviewing new potential employees, I'll send them a text. And if they don't reply within half an hour, I'm like, you're not committed enough.
Fucking insane.
It's like that hopefully these laws will do something to address that kind of psychopathy, because it is a cancer upon this world. Obviously, any reasonable contact outside of work, that's not a problem. That's not a problem that we're talking about. The problem is when someone is hounded, and certainly in these, in the finance sector, not that I'm too concerned about the welfare of people working in finance, but lots of people who are exploited and hassled by their boss, who are beaten by hustle culture and are told that they're lucky to have a job and their lives should be dedicated to increasing the profit margins of the massive corporation they work for, means that yes, there are no lines being drawn, and the separation between work and at home is disappearing.
Well, clearly you don't care about our economy, Tom.
Sorry.
Because according to Business Council of Australia, Business Council of Australia Chief Bran Black.
Mr. Black.
Amazing name.
Amazing
name.
Quote,
yep.
Right to disconnect amendment, and said that the change was going to be, quote, enormously difficult to work through in practice. I think he also said something about it ruining the economy. I don't have the quote here. He also was talking about, said that it would flow onto consumer prices, and specifically said, quote, the price of a pizza goes up if this goes wrong. Which is very concerning because, If I knew that. Also, the Minerals Council of Australia was in on this. Every employer group was out there being like, this is so fucked. She said that this would make doing business more expensive in Australia. DoorDash, this is on the overall bill itself, DoorDash, the employer of gig workers, said that the company was, quote, disappointed that the Parliament did not adopt more amendments to protect the flexibility of gig workers. That's kind of going back on that. But I mean, yeah, like business groups freaking out always make me think that we're making some progress. But then I'm like, is it just that, it is just so hard to make any gains on workers' rights that even the tiniest, the most minor of reforms prompt this sort of outrage and pushback.
Of course. It's DEFCON, whatever the most important DEFCON is, DEFCON 1 on every single movement towards increasing workers' rights. Again, if these people were around in the 1940s, they'd be opposing the weekend. It's funny. Like, you can't take anything they say seriously because they're not coming to any of this with a sense of good faith, and they're just backing in their own class interests. Can we point out the fact that I guess Brand Black, his name is Mr. Black?
Mr. Black.
I don't understand the reference.
Well, you weren't allowed to watch The Simpsons because it was trash. Yeah.
Gentlemen, to evil.
Well, yeah, I like that. Yes, you're right. They're nutsos. They would oppose anything. But even the response from people on Twitter was interesting. Adam Bant tweeted about it. Let me just open this tweet, see what exactly he said. And this tweet just went off. Like, it had so many people in the replies. It had hundreds and hundreds of quote tweets. Adam said, if you've been asked to answer an email, take a call, or edit a doc on your day off, then this one's for you. The Greens have just won you the right to disconnect. Now you'll have the right to ignore your boss when you clock off. Pretty chill. It's got 872 replies. And yeah, like the replies are just, there are, I think towards the later stages, there are people coming in and being like, why the fuck are people upset about this? This is actually good. But there are a significant number of people just doing the general like, oh, of course you would say that, lazy Greens, none of your supporters have a job, you'll just want to smoke pot. Like, it's fascinating to me that people would be like, no, it's good actually that my boss can hassle me constantly. There was did you see the retweet from
I'm sure a lot of these people are bosses, but yes.
Well, I guess so, yeah, maybe.
Yeah. But it's true. There is a neoliberal mind virus that tells people, no one wants to work anymore. You should be a little slave. Your boss should be your daddy. That is good. It's actually an admirable quality to just basically hand over your entire life, autonomy and freedom to the dictator that is your boss in your workplace. And it's good. And that hustle and grind will produce things and will make this world a better place.
That's what our country was built on. Did you see the mayor of Perth, who I'd never heard of before, but he retweeted this? Did you see that?
But no, Basil Zemplis is an incredible character that produces.
Basil Zemplis. I've never heard of this guy.
He used to be he's a radio DJ, maybe a game show host, I believe, and has said some horrific things about the trans community and was recently in a bit of hot water, I believe, suggesting that the women's tennis final was not worth watching, was shitty tennis compared to the men's
guy.
tennis.
Yeah, he retweeted Adam's tweet or quote tweeted it and said, is this the way to drive our country forward? Brilliant. Is this the spirit with which we built our great nation? Is this the attitude which has meant, can I get like some swelling music behind me actually? Is this the attitude which has meant good people can work hard and get ahead? I think not.
Jesus.
Which
our national character about being lazy? Isn't that our whole thing?
Yeah,
that we fuck around with larrikins, we don't do anything?
I don't know. Well, wait, hang on. With golden soil and wealth for toil.
Yeah.
So a lot of people pointing out that, yes, you're right. The nation was built on the back of unpaid labor in a lot of parts. We have a history of blackbirding and that sort of thing, but not really something we should maybe be celebrating. But sure, go off, Basil.
My blackbirding slave master shouldn't contact me outside of the 12 hours I'm working every single day, please.
Yeah.
I just want to switch off.
That's right. The other real focus of this, and I guess this is like just goes to show what an Oz poll thing this is. This is like very much in the world of Australian politics. But a lot of people being like, oh, well, how's this going to look for all your staff? Like, how's this going to look for political staffers? Someone retweeted. I retweeted Adam's tweet and said Adam's staff have the opportunity to do the funniest thing possible. I saw someone else reply and be like, "Great! I look forward to all Green staffers getting to work only 60-hour instead of 80-hour weeks." And this is like a massive point of contention in the chamber, in the Senate, when they were having this debate. Jackie Lambie was going back and forth with Murray Watt about advisors. She's talking about her advisors, and she says, "I reckon they could do me over, to be honest with you," and being like, "Well, how much overtime, how many hours do you think that our staff should be able to be contacted?" And Murray Watt is like repeatedly reiterating the point that Barbara Pocock also made when she introduced the amendments, which is that parliamentary staff receive compensation for contact outside of work hours. That's part of their position, and that's part of what would continue to. That's kind of the point of the laws, is that if you're going to be contactable outside of work hours, you get compensation.
Brilliant.
Yes.
So that's the status quo now, you're saying? Parliamentary staff now can do that, or they will under this new laws?
No, they already – that's the thing. A lot of contracts, a lot of agreements already have in place an arrangement where it's acknowledged that, you'll be contacted outside of hours. In fact, there was this is kind of an interesting point, right, because the ABC – this is from the ABC. They said, quote, "Some employees have clauses built into their enterprise bargaining agreements or individual contracts that they are expected to be available out of hours and are often paid allowances in lieu of overtime. The laws would make such practices the national standard." What I'm interested in, though, is this going to make that the national standard? Is it actually the effect of this more likely to be that people ask for compensation to work more rather than reclaiming more free time? And I think, I don't know, like maybe that's a failure of messaging. I guess we won't really know for a long time how this actually plays out. But particularly in the current economic context, honestly, I don't think, if given the choice between more time or more money right now, most people are choosing more money.
Well, yes, certainly. Particularly when it's more money for work that they're already doing, right? The choice between either being compensated for the extra work they're doing, as opposed to just working less and getting paid the same, I suppose.
But there's this clear, and I think it's admirable. It's an admirable kind of Overton window exercise. That thing of shifting the scope of discussion and what we see as possible is that the Greens have been trying to do. That initiative that we brought to the last federal election around the Future of Work Commission and talking about reducing the working week and a four-day work week with no loss of pay and that sort of thing. But increasingly, I've been having conversations with people that it's like, it just really feels like we're even further away from that right now in broader society, like among ordinary people, ordinary working people in Australia. I really don't think that their mind, unfortunately, is on like reclaiming time and more time to spend with your loved ones, even though it should be. We haven't had a reduction in the working week for such a long time. We're working longer and longer hours. It's really fucked up. But it's like people, I think the average person is like, what the fuck am I going to do with more time? I don't have the money to spend during my free time. I need fucking money. And like, if I have to work, if I have to be on call, available whenever my boss wants, and that means that I can get a little bit more money to spend to just pay the bills, like absolutely that's what I want. I'm not thinking about time off. I can't afford it.
Man, maybe the business council. I mean, again, the business council would oppose this no matter what. But maybe the fight is so extreme here because they see it as a sort of a slippery slope towards boostering the 4-day work week argument as well.
Perhaps, maybe, yeah.
I mean, look, this is the job of the Greens and the left, is to sort of to remind people they deserve so much more. You deserve to be paid a decent wage, and you deserve to work less to enjoy your life more. And I think anyone who was offered the deal, literally getting paid what you're paid now, but 1 day less, the vast majority of people would say, yes, please. That would be fantastic. And, intellectually that tide is turning. We're getting a lot more trials out there, and that's becoming a real possibility. But yeah, I take your point that for most people's, that's not front of mind because, of course, it's crazy, right? The idea of reducing the work week is a outlandish concept to most people because, as you say, it has not happened since the 1940s.
Yeah, but as a political focus, as a rhetorical focus, though, if you gave people a choice between getting paid the same amount and working less, or getting paid more and even working more, or working the same amount, like I really think they're going to go for getting paid more right now. Anyway.
Oh, God. Well, just a reminder, in Germany, they work less than us and they get paid more than us, okay? Like in the European, there are lots of European models in which you can get paid a decent wage and not work as much. And the idea, and I guess that challenges the notion that, we just need to work more and then I'll earn more money and live a better life and keep up with my bills. And you go, well, there is another way that's possible, which is a more broader social democratic arrangement of things in which you're not under constant cost pressure because everything hasn't been privatized and is, every single company and facet of your life is trying to wring you out for every possible dollar, and you are able to have a weekend or have a holiday, for God's sakes.
Yeah, I agree. That's what we deserve. I don't know. I hope we'll get there. In the meantime,
everyone deserves to live like a comedian. I've always
that's right. We can all live like you eventually one day, Tom. Well, I mean, interestingly, just quickly on that kind of stratification as to who is covered by this. Like, are we talking about managers or political staffers or whatever, just being able to ignore things? The Secretary of Unions New South Wales, Mark Morey, was saying that the right to disconnect should be accompanied by a ban on unpaid overtime for people earning less than $150,000. So actually creating a clear ban for a certain level of income. I thought that was an interesting proposal. I don't know if they even kind of considered that in the legislation.
Unpaid overtime. No one should be working unpaid overtime, should they?
But people are. That's the whole point.
They are, I guess.
Yeah. The question now is this kind of apparent last-minute bungle. It's kind of unclear around the criminal sanctions or the penalties for employers who refuse to comply with a fair work order about this right to disconnect. So it's being framed as, the government fucked up. Because they rushed this bill through the Senate, they didn't realize that they had left provisions in the bill that mean employers can face up to 12 months in jail for contacting an employee. Of course, that's not true. It is purely about, if the commission makes an order against an employer, that could include fines of up to $18,000, or I think it's slightly more, and criminal sanctions, which could include jail time. Now, what I'm unclear on is whether these amendments, whether the Greens do support the jail time, because there'd been discussion about whether the fines are proportionate. The Greens had said that reflects other penalties, and plus it only applies if the employer is flat out refusing to comply with an order. So it's not just that they have contacted an employee, it's that they've gone through this whole process. They've been found that, this is unreasonable action. They've been hit with an order by the commission, and then they're refusing to comply. But in the last minutes of the debate on this bill, the government was like, we just realized this includes criminal sanctions. We don't want those to apply. We seek leave to move amendments. Now, my understanding of Senate rules, and I may have this wrong, but I'm fairly sure what happened is they missed their opportunity to move amendments there, right? Like they moved through that part of amendments. The Senate had already moved on. And so when they try to do this late, they need to seek leave of the Senate. And they can only get leave for something like this, something that's not included in the normal order of business, if the whole Senate agrees. And so if anyone in the Senate disagrees, they don't get leave. And so the coalition disagreed, and so they didn't get to move this amendment. They're now saying they're going to have to come back with urgent legislation to, quote, fix this. Presumably the coalition were like, we're not going to let them do this because now we want to make it a fight about how rushed this was and how stupid they are and what a mess and chaos they are, and they want to send, small business owners to jail for sending their employee a text. But it's still kind of unclear to me, whether that was meant to be in there, what the Greens' position is. I actually don't know.
Have we criminalised wage theft? Has that happened? Was that in the last tranche too? Was that also a big deal?
Because I know that's happened at maybe that was implemented at a state level, because I think that we did that because you can only, maybe there's been like a national cabinet agreement that then has been implemented at a state level. I think that could
I'm pretty sure that was part of this whole IR reform thing was
really
part of it, too.
Maybe.
Which, people sort of saying, well, people break the law. And
you're right. No, it was. Yeah, I remember talking about it. Yeah.
So, jail time, presumably if you're not going to pay $18,000 and then you're flat out refusing to follow an order. If the rule of law
I don't know.
applies,
Send them
the
to
rule of law
jail.
applies.
I don't fucking care. I guess we'll see. We'll see when they come back with their
Build a
emergency
specific boss
legislation.
jail and send all the bosses there just for being bosses.
Just for being bosses. That's right. They don't even have to do anything wrong, just for existing. Open a business jail.
As soon as you get promoted.
You register, you get that ABN straight to jail.
Problem solved. Okay, so it sounds like Greens win on this IR thing with a whole bunch of caveats and, maybe always curtailed by the nature of industrial relations laws in this country, which have, at the heart of the problem is a lack of union power. And what you would hope a Labor government would be doing would be to be far more empowering people's right to organise and, getting rid of the horrific restrictions on unions' right to organise and workers' right to fight in the workplace. That would be the dream. But as it is, it sounds like this right to disconnect is, it's something.
Well, and in itself, I think we've said before, like any way that the Greens can move in on the IR space, on the labour rights space is crucial if we want to genuinely present ourselves as and be a socialist party, a party of the worker. Like any way that we can have like being an active and important and powerful and influential force in this debate is a win in itself, I think.
Be Barbara, not David.
Yeah, good. Be the good Pocock.
I'm Jonathan Sriranganathan, the Greens candidate for Mayor of Brisbane. The Liberal Party wasted thousands of dollars producing this cartoon of me on a bicycle to make me look silly. But I think bikes are great, and I want to create more separated bike lanes so residents can ride safely without getting hit by cars. I also want to make public transport free and frequent, and I want to make rents and house prices cheaper with a rent freeze and a vacancy levy on abandoned investment properties. So take a ride with the Greens. We're a lot more fun than the major parties.
All right, big episode this week. Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope you liked it. Call to action, stuff that you can do to make the world a better place, to get out there and be active. 2 little Greens member nerdy things straight off the bat here, so bear with us here, but we know there are lots of Greens members who listen, of course, and we love you and you're fantastic. If you're a Victorian Green, on Sunday, March the 3rd, there is a special meeting of the Victorian Greens to vote on some special resolutions. These are special resolutions relating to our Constitution. I know this sounds boring,
you should
but
skip
stay
ahead
with
if
me.
you're not a Victorian Green.
This will get – well, no, I'll try and be very brief. We had a new constitution passed in the party recently that was adopted by the party, and generally it was a good thing. This is all my personal opinion, by the way, but there were some bad things in it, specifically limiting people's eligibility to vote in pre-selections and for state council. State council I'm less fussed in, but basically if you joined as a new Greens member, you weren't allowed to vote in pre-selection battles for your candidates for a year. You had to be a member for a year. You have to, as the law currently stands. Lots of people had problems with this initially, but the general consensus was, let's vote for this new constitution and we can fix these problems later. There has been something of a debate and fight playing out around those issues. Some members who have a lot of my respect have been organising to try and, encourage other members to come together and say, hey, let's fix this. We want to encourage new people to the party. We want grassroots democracy. You should be able to sign up. There's a 3-month period is the new proposal. After 3 months, then you can vote in the pre-selection process and run for state council stuff as well. So those are the proposals. We'll put a link in the show notes. If you're a Greens member, you would have got an email about this. But if you can find it within yourself to attend that meeting, I think you have to be online now. I think the in-person seats have filled up, I believe. So you have to join online. Go along to that and vote for those resolutions. That's what I'll be doing. Obviously, everyone can make their own choices, but I think that's important. We also get a message from Valeria in South Australian Greens, the SA Greens, and just this week it was announced that the date for the Dunstan by-election is happening on Saturday, March 23rd. This is Stephen Marshall, the former Liberal Premier, is leaving Parliament, so there's going to be a state by-election in the seat of Dunstan. The Greens SA are in it to win it. Thank you, Valeria, for sending us this message. The Greens SA are in it to win it. If everyone who voted for us at the last election in Dunstan voted for us again, we only need 1,000 more votes to win, a 4.3% swing, which is pretty big for a state seat, but they're getting out there. It's the most marginal seat, and we need all the help we can get to turn Dunstan green. We have a strong candidate, Katie McCusker, who is a Payneham local and ready to fight for rent freeze and cap free public transport and to save our green spaces and parklands. There's lots of door knocks happening, including in St Peters and Marden on the 17th of February. But we'll put a link to Katie's candidate page there. I believe I'm going to be helping launch this campaign, but I'm in Adelaide for the Fringe.
You love a campaign launch.
It's me, yes.
That's your full-time gig,
Victorian
campaign launcher.
I'm all over the place. But, solidarity and sugars to Katie and the whole SA Greens team for that by-election on Saturday, March 23rd. SA Greens members obviously get involved and help out if you can.
Finally, if you're not in Victoria or SA, or even if you are, wherever you are, you can follow and support Unionists for Palestine. I think particularly in the context of, ongoing workers' challenges against their employers, like the ABC, firing them for their support of Palestine. Particularly important that we back in Unionists for Palestine. Someone sent us a message about this. They're on social media. It looks like maybe most significant presence is on Instagram. So we can put the link in the show notes, but the handle is Unionists for Palestine, all one word.
We love you, everyone. We'll catch you next week.
See you next week. Bye.
Serious danger to Australia.